That, ladies and gentlemen, was Stephen Wilson on a Telecaster.
Yeah.
Yes! Hey guys, welcome to That Pedal Show. Dan here.
Mick here, hello!
And of course, delighted to have none other than Mr. Stephen Wilson with us today. Stephen's dropped in on the way through to have some cake with Mr. Andy Partridge.
I have, yeah.
But what we have been doing is building you a new pedalboard.
You have.
For your upcoming world tour that's going to last a very long time.
Probably the best part of 2 years, I would think, once we start. Yeah.
Amazing. Must be said, congratulations. Your album debuted at #1 on the midweek charts.
It
today.
did, yes.
Amazing.
If you live long enough, strange things happen. Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
I've had a really good listen to the album because, of course, I've been a massive fan for a number of years. And it's amazing. I've loved this about, all your albums. Every album that you've done is a step in another direction.
Right.
There's never. I think the Porcupine Tree stuff definitely had that a commonality, but all of your solo stuff is really pushing things in different directions, which I love. One thing though that surprised me about this album is that I think you've described it as more a pop record.
I'm kind of slightly reticent about using the word pop because I think for a lot of people, pop is they have very negative kind of connotations with pop. I'm talking about pop in the way the Beatles
there you
are pop.
go.
Everyone thinks the Beatles are the greatest band of all time, and the Beatles are quintessentially a pop group. So that to me that's pop. But also the way ABBA can be pop. The way that Kate Bush can be pop, or Peter Gabriel can be pop. That for me, that's all. So pop is a very broad thing for me.
Yeah. Because the songs are...
They're songs. They're more songs.
Absolutely. Yeah. Love the album. It's amazing. Worked with our dear friend Mr. Paul Stacey on the album.
Yeah.
And I think this has been said by a number of people who've listened to it already, that the guitar sounds are extraordinary.
Okay, that's good to know,
if you could just... Because one question that we've had, and we'll get to this in a bit, we've had a bunch of people write in and I have some questions for you.
Right.
But take us through how you achieve the guitar sounds on the album.
Well, that's a very good question because the album in many ways started with a guitar sound.
Right.
And the reason I say that is because everything for me has kind of changed on this record. Now, people who've been... following me for a while, particularly the guitar players, will know that I play Paul Reed Smith guitars live. I play through Bad Cat. Amazing sound, amazing amp. It served me very well, and particularly in the days of Porcupine Tree when there was much more of a metal aspect in the sound. Right. It was perfect. Now I've moved away a lot from the sort of metal sounds, and I've found myself using a lot more clean sounds, and not only clean sounds, but just sort of more wiry, kind of dirty sounds. And this album started with me being in a situation at home where I wanted to write a song. I had an idea for a song, but all my gear was still out on the road. And all I had was a Mexican Telecaster, this one I'm holding right here, which I had bought 10 years ago.
Right.
Because I felt like, it was almost like I felt inadequate not having a Telecaster. She'd have a telly, have a strap. And I didn't have a Telecaster. I thought I should have a Telecaster. So I went and bought a Telecaster, put it in the corner of the room and didn't look at it for 10 years. Well, basically.
I remember being at your house.
Yeah, and seeing this.
And seeing that. And you said, oh, you play tellies, don't you? And I said, yeah. You said, oh, here you go. I went, oh, yeah, that's nice. You went, yeah, great. And then you put it back. Right. And then I think I popped in, however many years later, and it was still in the same position.
Yeah, you were probably the last person to play it before you set it. So that's part one of the story. I had this. I felt like I had to have a telly. I bought the telly. I never played it. Whenever I would pick it up, I would just think, this is not feeling like something I want to play at this moment in time.
Sure.
The other thing was, about 2 or 3 years ago, the guys from Hughes and Kettner came along to one of my shows in Luxembourg. I remember it in Luxembourg. And I kind of played their stuff occasionally from time to time over the years. And they brought me a present, which is this little practice amp, which you can see here. Tiny little thing, Tubemeister 5, it's called. And this was, in the same way that this was the only guitar I had in the studio at the time,
right.
That day, this was the only amp I had in the studio. And again, it was something that I'd kind of toyed around with a little bit, but I hadn't really played it properly. And I plugged in this telly to that little amp that day, And I started to play, and this is the sound. And I was like, that's amazing. What an amazing sound.
Yeah.
I said, and then it's one of those things where you almost question yourself, but it can't be. It can't be an amazing sound because that's a little practice amp, and this is a cheap Mexican telly that's never been set up properly. But it was an amazing sound.
Yeah.
And I started to write this song called People Who Eat Darkness using the most simple kind of... And of course, straight away I loved about the whole thing was you don't have to put a lot of gain on a telly.
Yep.
It just sounds aggressive.
Nothing rocks like the back pickup on a Telecaster.
So you can start, and I was playing chords like this, which you could never play with a really heavy sound, it'd just be a mush.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is amazing. And to cut a long story short, this became the sound of the record.
Wow.
This guitar, through this amp, became the sound of the record. And that's not to say we didn't experiment with other guitars and different amps, but the foundation and the influence that this sound had on all the songwriting was so fundamental to the way this record went. There's not a lot of really distorted sounds on this record. There are lots of very wiry, aggressive sounds. But there's not any of those kind of really, distorted, overdriven sounds. They're just wiry and aggressive. And I totally fell in love with it. And one of the things which I said to you when you came up the other day, and I said, look, Daniel, I've made the record with this sound. Obviously, I need something better for tour. And you were like, no, you don't. No, you don't. If that's the sound, that's what you're going to take on tour.
Yeah.
And you've kind of proved it to me today. So I'm going to take this little thing out because I just love it. It sounds fantastic.
So what we've done, just to explain, when I went over to Stevens, we're talking about the new rig and how we get that sound but louder.
Yeah, louder. Yeah, exactly. That's all I want. I didn't want the sound to change at all.
Yep.
Yeah.
And what this little amp has in the back of it is they call a red box output. It's basically a speaker emulation DI. You played me a song from the album where you played the solo on, where you actually, and that was the sound, the DI, the red box DI output straight into the desk.
Yeah.
And it's amazing.
Yeah.
So basically what the amp has, it's got some valves in the preamp and the speaker emulated output and then a solid state power section to a little full frequency speaker. Now, just hearing the amp by itself is epic. It's a fantastic little sound, but all of that sound has been crafted in the preamp section. So I thought, okay, that's the sound we want, but louder. Instead of doing a valve power amp section and doing all that sort of stuff, why don't we use a high powered solid state section, power amp, and use a 2x10 speaker cabinet. Now, the one thing about the little speakers that we notice, because they're so quick, they have plenty of bottom end, plenty of top end, a different sort of sounding mid-range. But when you pair that, so the plan is that you're pairing it with your Bad Cat. Right. We've got the Victory Sheriff 44 sort of standing in for the Bad Cat today. Yeah. But if I get you to play the Hughes and Kettner, so what's happening is the red box is coming out of the output of the Hughes and Kettner. We're going into the Seymour Duncan power stage, and that is then going into the 2x10. So the Seymour Duncan becomes this master volume. So what we'll do, if you play that, and then I'll add the Victory, the Sheriff on top of that, so you get a sense of, because the sound of the Bad Cat, whenever I've gone to see you at gigs, and I've heard that amp, it is incredible.
Amazing.
It's amazing. Yeah. What this is going to give you is that immediacy and the attack.
Yes.
And so the telly will shine, through that spank, but then the fatness of that the Bad Cat. So I'll kick the Bad Cat in on top of.
Sounds huge. And again, I love the fact I can play all these weird chords and you can hear every note.
man,
Yeah.
it's so big. It sounds so big.
Massive,
it's fantastic, and that's no effects. That's the guitar straight to the amplifiers, which is fantastic. Now, a couple of you guys, I posted a picture before on Instagram. A couple of you guys have noticed some different things already about the board. So what we've done, what's new? First of all, we have the mini vent. You've always been a fan of the rotary thing.
Yeah, I don't. Just to recap, I don't really like chorus sounds. What I do like is kind of modulating sounds. So I've got the tremolo, I've got the vibrato, and you've given me this new. So I was using the. Was it the option? No,
The option 5.
Option 5.
Destination rotation.
I'm using it so long I've even forgot what it is. I was using the option 5, but you said to me you need to try this out, and I have to say it sounds amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. So just a quick.
Yeah. Lovely. Yeah.
So it's what the guys at Neo Instruments do. I mean, they're, the Leslie thing is their whole bag. They've got the difference between the rotating bottom speaker, the low frequency speaker, and the horn, because they rotate at different speeds. We had a real Leslie in here and had a whole bunch of these in, and yeah, the Neo stuff was fantastic. They really understand the difference in speeds, and so separate circuits to do that thing. Okay, so the next new thing we have is the amp tweaker. Now this is the Tight Rock Pro, the Tight Rock Junior. Guy in the States called James Brown. We saw him when he was in LA. Amazing guy. He designed the 5150, a bunch of really famous high gain amplifiers. He does these line of pedals. There's the big ones that have all singing, all dancing, but the core sound he's put in these new small boxes, and this is the heavy overdrive, sort of heavy Marshall plexi, sort of gained up thing, which sounds like this.
Good, yeah.
It's amazing.
For a pedal,
I
feel like I want to get my detuned D guitar down into that pedal. Yeah, but that's great.
So that's great.
Yeah.
Now, Prince of Tone has been on your board for a while. I think originally when I did your board, we were looking for a booster.
Yeah.
And, I said, got to try this out. It's fantastic. And I've just put this up because I thought, let's revisit these things and just see where we can make improvements. And I sat down and A/B this against a bunch of things, because primarily you're using this to boost into the Bad Cat to sort of tighten things up and give it a bit of a punch.
Just give it a bit of edge, yeah.
And in that context, it just sings.
Yeah.
So that's been on there for a while.
Yeah.
Now a lot of people have asked why the two POGs, because I had not the micro POG, was it the micro POG?
Yeah.
Yes, the micro POG. And you were using it to add bass on one sound and then treble on another. So we're trying to think of ways that we can.
You mean a lower octave and a higher octave?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Exactly. Lower octave and higher octave.
Yeah. Well, live I only ever used it for the lower octave, but there's a few sounds on this record I've just made where I was also using a higher octave.
Right.
And we talked about having like a MIDI controllable thing that would sound, but then at the end of the day, I only really need one A sound or B sound. You said, well, why don't you just have two pedals set to different things? So that's what we're doing. Yeah.
So if let's have a listen to this.
So I do this kind of what I call a shoegazer guitar, which is there'll be a lot of delay and reverb on it too. Yeah, there we go. So that's something I would put that higher octave in,
right,
to make it really, really sing, a kind of celestial voice at the top, which is not something I've had before. But then the lower POG I've tended to use for the, again, if you put that. So that's what I've been using that for. Yeah.
Sorry, it sounds so good.
Yeah.
Great thing about those pedals, of course, they're polyphonic, so they don't freak out when you play chords as well.
Exactly.
Which is great. We've put this. This is the Quartz 2 by Selah Effects. Shout out to my mate Cal in Tasmania. So he makes these. They're fantastic. Does a whole bunch of things. We can MIDI map and set tap tempo to all the other MIDI stuff. But you know, you can see it's a nice big screen where you can write things and so you can keep, we did have a larger MIDI screen, but I wanted to try and keep everything on the one board so that the legend that is Tonto doesn't have to rebuild and the board every gig. So they're great. And the other new addition is the Cali 76. Now, as you guys know, this has been a favourite of Mix and mine for a long time, and it's the compressor that whenever you put on, it just sounds great, no matter how you set it. So it's basically an 1176 compressor in a pedal format, which, if we just go back to the standard.
Just put the post going on so we can start to clean up the sound. Final tap joke there. It's the sustain. The sustain on that. Beautiful, yeah.
It's amazing, isn't it? It's got so much character.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Everything else is as it was before. We've had a lot of people ask you about the programmable EQ and how you're using that in your rig.
I'm using it in a way to... I'm not even sure I'm going to need it as much now, because I've been using it in a way to battle the fact that the Bad Cat is quite dark sounding. So when I've wanted this, like that sound we just heard there, for example, now we're going through the Hughes and Kettner, and we've got all that brightness and that kind of, splang, to it. It's tough on the Bad Cat to get that, because the Bad Cat is it's a darker amp. It's great for the big sounds, but when you want those kind of attacking sounds, I've kind of had to compensate with quite a big EQ curve.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like compensating for the darkness of the Bad Cat amp.
Right.
I may not need it as much now. I'm thinking if I need that kind of sound, I'm going to be able to use the H&K channel. Yeah.
Awesome. Right, I will just grab... One second. Okay, we have some questions. So JBS89 wants to know what the band lineup will be for this tour.
It's basically the same lineup I've had on previous tours. So my drummer is Craig Blundell, my bass player is Nick Beggs, my keyboard player is Adam Holtzman. The only person that's going to change is the other guitar player, because Dave Kilminster, who was with me on the last tour, and Guthrie Govan, who was with me on the previous tour, they're both much more gainfully employed these days. One with Hans Zimmer and one with Roger Waters. So I've just hired a fantastic guitar player called Alex Hutchings. You probably know.
Yeah, Alex does a lot of stuff, did Boss demos and stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Amazing guitar player.
Yeah, great guitar player, super nice guy. And so he's going to be the guitar player on this coming tour.
Oh, fantastic. Right, okay. Here we go. Oh, this is interesting. Die XL wants to know, do you have perfect pitch? If not, how did you develop such a good ear?
I don't have perfect pitch. In fact, I have. I really struggle sometimes. I don't even. I mean, I am kind of a very intuitive musician. I don't know the names of the chords I play. I know it's almost a cliche to say that now, because so many people say that, but it's really true. It's a cliche. It's true. I don't know the chords I play. Very often, if I'm in a rehearsal situation with my band, they'll say to me, "Oh, keyboard." Adam will say to me, "What chord is that?" "I don't know. It's that." And he'll say, "Oh, you're playing a D flat diminished seventh." "Yeah, whatever." So I mean, I don't know any of that. But the answer to the second part of the question, I listened to records when I was a kid, and I keep listening to records, and I try to figure out how, you know, people make these sounds, and I've done it in a very kind of, you know, idiot savant way. I didn't train. You know, the first thing I do when I buy any new gear is throw the manual away and just start turning knobs and experimenting. And I just approach things as a very, you know, innocent, kind of almost naive way. I know very little, as you know, I know very little about guitars even, you know. But I just think some people are musical, and I guess I'm one of those people. And I don't have perfect pitch. But I think I hear this sound in my head, and I have worked out over the 20 or 25, 30 or 30 years now I've been a musician, I've worked out how to make some of those things I hear in my head manifest in the real world.
Nice.
But that's only through making a lot of mistakes and trial and error. Yeah,
nice. Yeah. All right, and last one, Mr. Connor Baxter. Live guitar sounds versus recorded guitar sounds. As in how your approach between what you're doing in the studio and then reproducing that live. Right. You know, are you, like, for example, when you're doing the reverbs and delays, are you meticulously going through each reverb and delay for every sound, or are you finding a couple of reverbs and delays that you like and you're sort of copying those between presets? Are you, you know, are you consciously trying to, how close
am
to
I
the
consciously
album?
trying to match the album?
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
There's two things I would say about that. Firstly, the answer to the first part of that question is kind of halfway between the two. I do have a generic set of patches, like a generic reverb and generic delay, which I would say probably work for 60% of the sound.
Right. Yep.
But I also have separate presets when I want something very particular, something very specific character. The answer to the other part of the question is, I find with live, well, let's start with studio. In the studio, you need to push the processing and the effects much further. When you get to being in a live situation, if you use the same sounds that you've had in the studio to create this effect, I find it's too much. It's quite messy. Right. So I find actually live, because I think it's just because of the sheer volume, the amount of gain and the volume you're using live. I tend to find you dial back certainly the mix, but also sometimes the actual character of the effects. It produces the same effect with much more of the direct guitar, if you know what I mean. Sure. And that is to do with volume. You know, if you're listening to something at home in a very kind of civilized volume, to make a guitar sound really, you need to cheat. You need to fool the ears into thinking that they're listening to a really loud guitar when they're not. Right. But when you actually get that volume and that amplitude in the real world, you need to do much less. You know what? It's a really good analogy. The difference between actors that work in the theatre and the actors that work in the movies, because they say actors that work in the movies, they do very, very little with their face. So subtle then. Because they know that the camera will capture everything. But actors in the theatre, they have to. So I think for me, there's that analogy. When you're creating these sounds live, much less is enough. Amazing. That's fantastic. Yeah. I've got a personal question to ask you. Yeah. Mick and I went to see you at the Albert Hall, and you were playing. I mean, I've seen you at least a dozen times, if not more. And there's a song that you're playing, and Nanette was singing on it. Oh, Mick, routine, maybe routine. Yeah, okay. Yeah. So I've told the story before. I'm, at the Albert Hall, and the video starts, and that song starts, and then I could feel myself going. Right. And I was like, yeah. Oh God, Mick's going to see me blub, and this isn't going to be good. And then I turn around and Mick's already gone. I'm like, oh thank God. So, your live shows where you bring this, you bring. I mean, sonically, it's amazing. Your sound guy, Ian, who I've known for a number of years, is incredible, and really knows how to bring everything that's happening on stage, out the front to everyone. Yeah. But then the visual aspect of what's going on, you create this atmosphere. Yeah.
So when you're writing songs, are you at any stage aware of this is how this is going to transpire live, or does the song just happen and then you sort of work that almost theatrical element into it later? Because
again, it's a bit of both, and the reason I say that is that when, you know, I've always thought of my songs as little pieces of cinema in a way, you know, and most of my songs are written from a character's perspective. What I mean by that is, like on this new album, if I'm going to write a song about the refugee crisis, for example, now if I was Bono or Bruce Springsteen or something, I might write something, you know, you bad politician, you listen up good, this is bad. Yeah. I can't do that. I'm rubbish at that. I sound so, if I try and be political, I sound so, you know, fraudulent. So, but what I can do is I can take a character, create a character, and I can tell a story through that character of somebody that's actually in the refugee crisis from a very personal perspective, very empathetic perspective. And I find I'm able to do that much better. And for me, they're almost like little pieces of cinema for the ears, you know. But if you start writing songs from the perspective of it's a piece of cinema for the ears, it's only one extra step to say, okay, now let's make that really a piece of cinema. Right. And of course, when I'm writing these songs, I have these. This is what I was saying to you earlier about the sounds. I have these sounds in my head, and I've learned how to get them out into the real world. Well, I have no talent at all for visual interpretation of things, but I've been very fortunate to meet people like Jess Cope, who did the animations you're talking about, and Lasse Hoyle, who does the live action stuff. And I can somehow get my ideas across to them by talking about the lyrics, or using other reference points from other movies I've seen or anything like that. And then they're able to go away and kind of create these images which kind of, if they're not identical to what I saw in my head, they're pretty close. Right. They're pretty close. So I think the answer to your question, it does all grow out of the songs, and it grows out of these songs having a very visual aesthetic, even when they only exist in the audio plane, if you know what I mean. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your
Pleasure.
time today. Guys, I would just say, if you haven't seen Stephen before, just go. I promise you'll thank me later.
I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the most extraordinary
So do I.
thing. Yeah, awesome. But cheers, mate. Thank you so much for your time. And
My pleasure.
yes, we will see you at the gig.
Yeah, absolutely. Royal Albert Hall, if not before.
Wicked.
Thanks,
Right.
man.
Cheers, guys. Thank you so much for watching. A massive thank you to our preferred retailers in the UK and Europe, that is.
Editon's Music.
In USA, that
Bridge
is.
City Guitar.
And in Australia, that is.
Pedal Empire.
Fantastic. A massive thank you to all the guys on Patreon, the patrons of Patreon. Thank you so much, guys. Also, to everyone that's gone to thatpedalshowstore.com and bought a lovely garment or a tiara, whatever this takes your fancy. Cheers, guys. Thanks so much. Of course, massive thank you to Stephen Wilson. And we will see you guys next week. Cheers, guys. Bye. Man, that is epic. Bye.